Hello, and welcome back at another tutorial about the Korg Pa5X. Today we are going to take a quick look in the synthesizer of the Korg Pa5X. The Korg Pa5X contains a great synthesizer, and once you know how to program it, you can create any sound you want. And today we are going to create a new sound based on a factory sound, and that will be a moving style pad sound where all kind of things happens. So let's start. First, make sure that we have the same settings so that you can replicate it on your own Pa5X. So let's go to the factory style, the pop style, and choose the Forget Me Pop, or search the Forget Me Pop if you have the music conversion. Then press the 1 button from the keyboard set, and now we have the acoustic piano. But we want to create a moving style pad, so we are going to select one of the keyboard sets in the synth section, and let's use the, for instance, classic pad 1. So if we are going to the key section, you can see, hey, the classic set 1, and let's disable the split and lower, consists of 3 items, and we are going to use the upper one because we are going to create that upper sound. So if we listen to that, well, you hear it only, let me say it. You hear it only on the right side, so go to the mixer and double click and set the panning to 0. So we are going to modify this pad to a new pad sound which is constantly moving and evolving. So you do that in the synthesizer. And how do you do that? Well, it's very easy. Press the Rec Edit button and you come in the modification area of the Korg Pa5X, and we are going to change a sound. So go to the Sound, Edit tile. So now we are in the programming environment of the synthesizer. And we want to change that OB pad. So press it and we are going to look for it in the synth pad section, and it's on the first position. So now we have that OB pad again. So before we going to the in-depth stuff, you have the macro edit, and there you can use things like the cutoff. So make it a little bit darker. Add some resonance. Make it brighter. Set it to 0 again. We have the LFO depth, so set this to a high value to hear what we are doing. So very nice. So we are going to lower the LFO speed. So great. This is a great way to make sounds more analog, and of course it's way overdone now. But we are going to lower the LFO depth quite a bit so that it feels very subtle. Sound programming is all about subtlety. So around 4, that means that the pad sound is now constantly moving in the pitch. So that's a great trick for the macros, and you can do this also from the fader area in the main section. The next thing we are going to do is to disable the master FX. We can, for instance, use the insert FX to do some really fun stuff. So let's do something like this. Go to the mix tab and use the stereo decimator. If you want to make the things more dirty, you can do it over here, or if you want a more pronounced thing, go to the decimator plus compressor, and there we can set the sampling frequency and resolution. So you see the resolution is at 24 bits now, but the old samplers worked with 12 bits, so if you are going to lower the resolution, it will get much more dirty. Up to completely destroying the signal. So you hear this resolution. So we are going to reset it to 24 again. You can also set the sampling frequency to much higher with a lower resolution. So if you are going to do CD quality, then it's 48 kilohertz, and set it to 12. The sound will be a little bit more dirty. So you can do all kind of things with this. Set something like this, the filter, and wah-wah filter. Now, whatever you want. But we are not going to do that now. It's just to show you that you can do these kind of things in the sound area. So now we are going to in the in-depth stuff. We said, hey, this default OB pad. We want to modify it to an evolving pad. Now, how do you do that? Press the menu button over here, and you have your programming environment of the synthesizer. So if you go to the basic set, you see that we have 24 oscillators, and each oscillator is available for your sounds. This specific pad uses 3 oscillators, and if you go to the oscillator tab, you can see it uses the vintage analog sample. On the second oscillator, it also uses the vintage analog sample, probably because it wants to do something with stereo spreading. And at the third oscillator, they are using an analog string. So we are going to add a specific sound to that, to this setup. So we say, hey, we don't want 3 oscillators, but we want 4. Now, if we go to the oscillator page again, you see that the 4th tab is now enabled. So press that one, and now you see that the default is a piano on top of your sound. So now we have created a piano with a pad sound. Otherwise it's too loud. And if you press the number, you can go through the entire library. And there are a lot of sounds to choose from, which you can layer. So you can really create your own sounds. Now, we want something with synthesizers, and those start around 1000 samples. Let's go a little bit up. Yeah, the synth Pelican is great. So you hear now something that is moving on top of your default strings. So we are going to program this sound to fit it much more in the sound we are after. We want to hear all the edits we are doing on this specific oscillator, and you can do that by pressing the menu button on top, the hamburger menu, and press solo oscillator. Now we only hear that 4th oscillator. So this is the sound we are going to add to that sound. But we want to program it. We want to have motion in it. Now, how do you do that? And I'm going quite quickly over all these concepts, because in my other tutorial, where I explain how to program Jean-Michel Jarre sound, which you can find on my YouTube channel, I go a lot slower and much more in depth in these techniques, but this is the quick version of programming the synth. So we want to modify this, and we are going to use the filter for this. So press the filter tile, and we are going to use the low pass resonance filter for this. You can also use the low pass and high pass filter, and then you also have a filter B, which creates the high pass filter, but now we are going to use only the low pass filter. So if we lower the frequency, the sound will be darker. And that's great, because we want this sound modulated by an LFO. An LFO is basically a low frequency oscillator, which is, well, something like a robot turning the dials in a specific pattern. So we are going to say, hey, we want that LFO use, well, let's use LFO2 for that, because LFO1 we are going to use later. And we want to send the value of LFO2 to that specific sound. So it was on 40, very dark, and we're going to say, hey, let that pattern modify that specific So now that LFO is used on that specific filter. So now we have to program the LFO. So press the menu button again, and we are going to use the LFO tile. We know that we use LFO2, and you see that it enters this specific pattern in that graph, triangle 0. But we want some things like unpredictability to it. So we are choosing a random 4 vector for this, and you see that it basically has a specific pattern. Well, we don't want to have it too drastic, but you also see this line in the middle in the graph, and that's the position of the 0 point value for the LFO in the filter effect. So we want to make it a little bit more to that 0 point so that it only adds up. So we are going to say, hey, something like 32. And now it does this pattern over that specific thing. And we want it much slower. So we are going to lower the frequency. So now, very slow, it's going to move that specific sound. Let's set a little bit more to the offset. So you hear it moving now. So very nice. So that's something you can do. So let's listen to it combined with the other oscillator. So we are going to the oscillator page, and we are going to remove the solo oscillator. Now you hear it together with the other sounds. And it's on top now of those other things. If you listen really closely, you can hear it. Yeah, there it comes. You can set it a little bit. Lower the other ones a little bit. So we have some room to play with. So very nice. Now, how cool would it be if we have something, press the exit button, that we have something like this. So let's add that movement to the first oscillator, so that we have some extra movement on top of those things. We know how to do this now. We go to the filter, say, hey, for the first one, I want to modify the filter. And we are going to say, hey, we are going to use LFO1 for this. Let's say. Now the LFO1 is basically modifying the first filter oscillator. So we're going to program the LFO1, and for the LFO1 we are going to use something like this, the default triangle, but we are going to lower that value too. Maybe a different, something like a guitar. Now it goes from 0 and up and a little bit down. So that's soft thing of the OB pad. Now you have all kind of things moving on top of that. So now the last thing we have to do is to add some FX to them. So let's use a panning delay in the insert. Normally you do it in the center fix, but for the sound I want to have all kind of sounds sent to different channels. So use the stereo auto pan delay, you don't have to program it. And we are going to reprogram the reverb. We'll set the size to 84, the decay to, well, 82, diffusion to 56, and the pre-delay to 15. I'm going to make it a little bit more weird, and now you have this. And hear how everything moves. So now you're basically done. You can tweak it a little bit. I think the LFO could be a little bit faster on making the sign. So if you want to compare it to the original one, press the hamburger menu on top, press compare. This was the old version. Not bad, but a little bit dull. So if we are going to use the new version. So the last thing we have to do is to save it so that we can recall it in our own performances. So press the hamburger menu, press save sound. You can select one of the user banks, name one that is free. Well, it finds the first free slot, so set it on slot 2 in my case. And we are going to give it a name. So we can press the exit button now. We are done programming. And we have the sound over here. That was the original one. Set it to 0. And now we are going to select user. And in the user tab 1 you have your new version for this. With this few minor tweaks, you can program your own sounds. It sounds a lot better than the default OP pad. So that's the way to do it, and hope this helps, and see you in the next tutorial.